Biting his lip the morning after the last general election, Nick Clegg was a defeated man. Hopes of a Lib Dem surge had evaporated and he'd lost MPs.
Last night was a disappointment for the Liberal Democrats.
Nick Clegg had no idea, but a few streets away, David Cameron was preparing to offer him full-blown coalition. It would propel the Liberal Democrats into government for the first time since the Second World War. It would transform Nick Clegg's life and shatter his popularity ratings.
In from the cold of opposition to the corridors of power in Whitehall.
Hi, Danny. Hi, David. Hi. So, budget.
For 5 years, Nick Clegg and his ministers have shaped government policy, vetoed what they don't like, from foreign policy to the budget.
Make sure there's no last-minute Conservative trickery-prockery with the numbers.
5 years ago, just down the corridor from what became Nick Clegg's office, the first peacetime coalition since the 1930s was negotiated in this room. Nick Clegg was deeply worried that voters wouldn't believe coalition would work. So he instructed his ministers not to slag off their coalition partners and to project a mood of harmony. And on that project, he truly led from the front.
Yes, of course, by having to prove that coalition worked, we were quite so tight-lipped about the obvious day-to-day differences that exist between the Liberal Democrats and Conservatives in those early stages.
We're talking about a couple of years or so.
Yeah, maybe.
How's the marriage going, gentlemen?
Magic moments when two hearts are
We're all... But the real...
Keep doing this, you won't find anybody disagree on in a bloody TV debate.
I think that Nick may have confused the role of Deputy Prime Minister.
Chris Huhne helped to negotiate the coalition and served 2 years in the cabinet.
In that he thought Deputy Prime Minister was also a chairmanship role, like the Prime Minister's role. But actually, of course, if you are leader of the minority party, you've basically got to be pretty feisty to represent the interests of your family, of your political party in this coalition outfit. And if you try and just sort of chair things and always split the difference, which is the Prime Minister's role, then you're going to end up not necessarily doing a good deal for your party.
The coalition wasn't seen as a business arrangement, which it should have been.
1 year ago, Lib Dem MP John Pugh called for Nick Clegg to stand down.
It was seen as though the Liberal Democrats had decamped and gone off and joined the Conservative tribe. That wasn't the case, but that's the way it would have appeared.
That's what they were shouting outside on tuition fees, cuts. The accusation was betrayal.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
The voters will have to make their judgment on May the 7th. I think the history books, for sure, will judge us very kindly for having put the national interest first.
They endured in government to the very last cabinet. Nick Clegg believes the chummy tone of the early years had to be done, but will not be repeated in future coalitions.
Whoever does those coalitions won't need to prove in a way that particularly I had to and the Liberal Democrats had to, as the sort of smaller of the two parties. We had to prove and go out of our way to prove that coalition government worked.
Nick Clegg always thought this would be the election when he'd lead the Lib Dems into power after decades in the wilderness. He thought he'd do it with about 100 MPs or more. Instead, he got into power 5 years earlier than he ever thought, with about half that number of MPs. He's now got no hope of expanding his base. He's fighting a defensive campaign, just trying to hold on to the seats he's got. And in Lib Dem high command, they've even given up on some of those.
If we have what I call a fortress strategy, I think that's the road to ruin.
Some of your MPs worry that being in coalition is just turning you into some sort of self-destructive cult. You reduce in size all the time. Go into coalition, reduce in size, you'll go into another coalition if you do, and you'll come out even smaller again, maybe not even be viable, maybe even disappear.
But what is the alternative? To be perpetual opposition? To throw stones from the sidelines? Look, I have a very old-fashioned, you call me old-fashioned, if you're in politics, it's not just about dreaming big dreams, it's also doing things. It's also doing things. Do you know
Even
what?
if it risks
No, hang on. If you do things...
the near annihilation of your party.
It's not near annihilation. It's nonsense. It's complete nonsense, this breathlessness. And it is, I mean, I hope you'll have the decency on May the 8th when you interview me then, to say you were wrong. And all the people who are sort of predicting the end of the Liberal Democrats, as they have done for generations, will be proven wrong.
Every May, the party's been battered by local election results. Every year, Nick Cleggs told friends support would come from soft Tories and others, considerers, but they haven't turned up. Last May, the Lib Dems hit a new low, 5th in the European elections. It took hours before a strained Nick Clegg finally emerged to face the cameras.
Well, it is gutting. It's heartbreaking.
I watched from that very, very low moment, and it was, you quite rightly say, expressed very clearly in those photographs.
Paddy Ashdown is running the Lib Dems general election campaign.
I think he did ask the question, am I part of the solution or am I the problem? Is it better for my party that I should say? And he certainly asked that question and then concluded rather swiftly that he was.
Last year, you said he was a drag on the vote and should probably go.
Yeah.
Would you be in better shape if he had?
I genuinely don't know now, because I think the electorate are getting Nick in a way that they didn't in the past. That being said, there will be a rationing, to say the least, of the presence of Nick Clegg on some Lib Dem literature in some places. I don't think there's anything strange about that. I think people are just recognising the fact that in certain areas, in certain places, some faces fit better than others.
Paddy Ashdown says Nick Clegg is now at peace with himself, ready for whatever the voters throw at him, because he feels he did the right thing.
Clearly, there are millions of people out there. They're not saying now they're going to vote for the Liberal Democrats, but as we move forward in the months and years ahead, because of course we've taken a temporary knock by going into coalition, doing controversial things to fix the economy, I think actually the Liberal Democrats are now in a more secure position to grow faster in the future, because we are where many, many, many millions of our fellow citizens are, who want the right balance between a strong economy and a fair society. If you want to grow in British politics, it's not rocket science. You've got to be, and you've got to speak up for, and you've got to represent the interests of where many, many other people are. And I actually think that decent liberal centre is where many people are, and of course it's our job to communicate that in the years ahead.
Meeting apprentices in Whitehall, some Lib Dems think Nick Clegg is risking his party's future by making coalition the central mission. Nick Clegg believes it's the only path his party can follow, and one day, he can't be sure when, the voters will reward them.